What type of reign was Amaziah's in Judah? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Kings on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 2 Kings chapter 14, verses 1 to 22. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 1. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Kings chapter 14, beginning at verse 1. In the second year of Joash, the son of Jehoash, king of Israel, Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoadan of Jerusalem. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, yet not like his father David. He did everything as his father Joash had done. However, the high places were not taken away, and the people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. Now it happened, as soon as the kingdom was established in his hand, that he executed his servants who had murdered his father the king. But the children of the murderers he did not execute, according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, in which the Lord commanded, saying, Fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor shall children be put to death for their fathers, but a person shall be put to death for his own sin. He killed 10,000 Edomites in the valley of Salt, and took Selah by war, and called its name Joktheel to this day. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, Come, let us face one another in battle. And Jehoash, king of Israel, sent to Amaziah, king of Judah, saying, The thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, Give your daughter to my son as wife. And a wild beast that was in Lebanon passed by and trampled the thistle. You have indeed defeated Edom, and your heart has lifted you up. Glory in that, and stay at home. For why should you meddle with trouble, so that you fall, you and Judah with you? But Amaziah would not heed. Therefore Jehoash, king of Israel, went out. So he and Amaziah, king of Judah, faced one another at Bethshemesh, which belongs to Judah. And Judah was defeated by Israel, and every man fled to his tent. Then Jehoash, king of Israel, captured Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Jehoash, the son of Ahaziah, at Bethshemesh. And he went to Jerusalem, and broke down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim to the corner gate, 400 cubits. And he took all the gold and silver, all the articles that were found in the house of the Lord, and in the treasuries of the king's house, and hostages, and returned to Samaria. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoash, which he did, his might, and how he fought with Amaziah king of Judah, were they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Jehoash rested with his fathers, and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. Then Jeroboam his son reigned in his place. Amaziah the son of Joash king of Judah lived 15 years after the death of Jehoash the son of Jehoahaz king of Israel. Now the rest of the acts of Amaziah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And they formed a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent after him to Lachish and killed him there. Then they brought him on horses, and he was buried at Jerusalem with his fathers in the city of David. And all the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and made him king instead of his father Amaziah. He built Elath and restored it to Judah after the king rested with his fathers. In our last lesson, we covered the death of Elisha the prophet, as well as the defeat of the Syrians by Jehoash in Israel. This victory is important to today's reading, so let's keep that political situation in Israel in the back of our minds. Coming to chapter 14 now, we have a little catching up to do in Judah, beginning with the reign of the 8th king of Judah, Amaziah, son of Joash. Looking at our timeline, we find that Amaziah took power in Judah in the second year of Jehoash in Israel. This would place our date to around 794 BC. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and would reign 29 years in Judah, which would bring our timeline down to about 765 BC, something that we will represent by shifting our timeline up. There will be internal markers that would confirm this date, so we can be pretty confident about it. Amaziah is said to have done that which was right in the sight of the Lord, yet not like David his father did. The writer of 2 Kings says he is more comparable to his father Joash, who we learn, served the Lord in the beginning, but allowed idolatry to enter the land later. We did not get this piece of knowledge from the writer of 2 Kings, though, but from the writer of 2 Chronicles. The writer of 2 Kings does tell us that the high places were allowed to remain under Amaziah, and the people sacrificed at them, something that was a scourge in Judah because the temple stood where they were to offer sacrifices to God. Having these high places also tempted Judah to worship other gods at them, something they did from time to time. Recall from chapter 12 that Amaziah became king after a conspiracy was made against his father Joash that led to Joash's death. This explains why soon after the reign of Amaziah began, that he executed the servants who had murdered his father. You see, no matter how bad a ruler is, we don't get the right to simply execute them. Joash was the Lord's anointed and so didn't deserve to be executed by these servants. However, Amaziah didn't execute the children of these conspirators, for the law of Moses said in Deuteronomy 24 verse 16 that children were not to be put to death for the sins of their fathers. Now, I find this quotation interesting here, for modern scholarship often places the writing of Deuteronomy as something written late, perhaps during the captivity, and not by Moses. And yet, the actions of Amaziah are guided by the passage in Deuteronomy, and the writer of 2 Kings makes an exact quotation of it. This type of behavior, and the fact that Amaziah's father, Joash, received the book of the law upon his ascension, show us that the law of Moses predates 2 Kings, leading further credence to the fact that it was written in the days of Moses. That modern scholars dispute this is of no real concern to me, as I believe they are wrong on a whole host of other biblical issues too numerous to expound upon here. Beginning in verse 7, we get some of the exploits of Amaziah. The first concerns Edom. Recall that during the days of Jehoram, some 50 years earlier, Edom had broken free from Judah's rule and began to rule themselves again. Well, Amaziah had decided that he wanted to take parts of Edom back, and was largely successful, for he killed 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt and took Selah by war, renaming it Joktheel. Now, this doesn't mean that Edom was again subjugated by Judah, for we know from other biblical passages that they weren't. But it does mean that Amaziah defeated the Edomites here. Now, there is more to this story that the writer of 2 Kings leaves out, that the writer of 2 Chronicles does not, which would aid in our understanding of the events from verse 8 on down. When going to attack Edom, 2 Chronicles 25 makes clear that Amaziah had hired some men from Israel to help, but when Amaziah was reproved by God's prophet for doing so, Amaziah sent them back, making these men angry, so angry that they raided cities in Judah, killing 3,000. That would explain why Amaziah desired to go to battle against Jehoash in Israel. Now remember from earlier that Jehoash had defeated the Syrians 3 times likely by this point, and so his army was feeling confident. Meanwhile, all that Amaziah had done was defeat the Edomites once and taken a city. Jehoash thus sent messengers to Amaziah with a parable. He said that the thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar in Lebanon, asking for the cedar's daughter be given to his son as a wife. However, a wild beast that was in Lebanon passed by and trampled the thistle. What is the meaning of this? Well, Jehoash viewed himself as the cedar and Judah as the thistle. For someone to ask for another's daughter in marriage for their son, they must view themselves as equals. In other words, a peasant's father cannot ask for the king's daughter in marriage for his son. Jehoash, though, didn't view himself as equal. He had defeated the Syrians, a major power in the region, while Amaziah had merely defeated the Edomites, a victory that caused him to become arrogant. Thus Jehoash advised Amaziah to withdraw his request for battle. Amaziah would not heed this advice, and so Amaziah and Jehoash faced each other in Bethshemesh in Judah, with Jehoash winning, taking Amaziah captive, destroying the walls of Jerusalem, and taking all the gold, silver, and articles that were found in the temple and the king's house. He also took hostages from Jerusalem and returned to Samaria. Now, if Amaziah was a righteous king, Why would God allow him to be defeated by the evil Jehoash of Israel? Well, this again is where 2 Chronicles fills in some of the gaps. For after the victory over the Edomites, Amaziah brought back some of the gods of the Edomites and worshipped them. This was therefore punishment by God for that. Verses 15 and 16 are a repetition of 2 Kings 13, 12, and 13, talking about the death of Jehoash and the ascension of Jeroboam II in Israel. And while I cannot prove this for sure, I believe this is repeated here in order to introduce the fact that Amaziah lived 15 years after the death of Jehoash. What this statement does is gives us a time frame for Amaziah's capture. Jehoash had already been reigning for 2 years by the time Amaziah took the throne. Amaziah's war with the Edomites likely didn't happen immediately, but given that Jehoash would have had time to defeat the Syrians 3 times, placing Amaziah's war with the Edomites around the 4th year of his reign, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to assume this. Now we don't know how long Amaziah was held captive by Jehoash, but it could easily have been for the rest of Jehoash's reign, hence why the text says that he lived for 15 years after the death of Jehoash, with it being Jeroboam II who let him go free again sometime later. A lengthy captivity for Amaziah would also help explain the reign of his son Azariah, whose length and position of reign in the timeline is difficult to explain without there being some sort of co-regency. However, if Amaziah had been imprisoned in Samaria for a number of years, leading to a co-regency, then Azariah's reign becomes much easier to understand, as does the conspiracy against Amaziah later in his reign. 2 Chronicles makes it clear that later in life, Amaziah turned away from following the Lord, which ultimately led to this conspiracy. Now, you wouldn't think that simply turning away from the Lord by itself should lead to a conspiracy against him, for Judah had done this from time to time. But we're going to learn that Azariah was a righteous king, and so if Amaziah turned away from following the Lord following his return, it is conceivable that some in Judah might think this would bring the Lord's wrath. And so, since Azariah was already co-regent with his father, killing Amaziah wouldn't create any instability, as Azariah could simply become king outright. Thus, Amaziah was killed, but not in Jerusalem, but in Lachish, the second strongest city in Judah, being to the southwest of Jerusalem towards the border with the Philistines. With Amaziah dead, Azariah, his son, began his sole reign in about 765 BC. We'll discuss how long his co-regency likely was when we come to chapter 15, but the one thing we need to note is that Azariah's age, being 16 years old, is how old he was when his co-regency started, not when his sole reign started. Yes, that might seem confusing at first glance, but the age when Azariah became king, which a co-regency is what is being mentioned here, and is a point that will become clear in chapter 15. Azariah is said to have built Elath and restored it to Judah. Elath is a city near Ezion-Geber and the Red Sea in the south, and so by doing this, Azariah would have restored Judah's access to the Red Sea, something we have not seen since the days of Jehoshaphat, some 75 years earlier. The rest of Azariah's reign will be covered in chapter 15. In the next chapter, though, we'll be discussing the king who had the longest reign in Israel's history, that of Jeroboam II. So we hope you'll return for that. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Kings chapter 14, verses 23 to 29, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.